All right, let's dive into one of the most famous stories ever written, Charles Dickens's Oliver Twist. You've probably heard of it. It's this epic tale about poverty, crime, and really just the search for a place to belong. But what's crazy is how it all kicks off with one simple request that launches an unforgettable journey right into the dark underbelly of 19th century London.
These 6 words. That's it. A small, hungry orphan says this one sentence, and it ignites a revolution in his own life. But it also sends a shockwave through the whole society that created him. It's got to be the most famous request for food in all of literature. And it's right here that our story really begins.
Okay, so what is the story? Well, Dickens's original subtitle calls it The Parish Boy's Progress. We're following the journey of our young hero, Oliver. A journey that, let's be honest, starts out as anything but progress.
To really get Oliver's world, you have to understand its main villain. And it's not a person, it's a law. The Poor Law of 1834. This law created the workhouse system, and the whole idea was to make these places so awful that people would do literally anything to avoid them. See, the powers that be believed poverty was a moral failing, and Oliver is born directly into the jaws of this cruel, cruel system.
Oliver's early life is just a cascade of misfortune, one thing after another. He's born without a mother, gets shipped off to an abusive caretaker, and then he's dragged back to the workhouse. That's where he makes that fateful request for more food, which lands him in solitary confinement before he's sold off for £5. After a totally miserable apprenticeship with an undertaker, he decides he's had enough. He runs away, setting off on a 65-mile walk to London.
But of course, London isn't the sanctuary he was hoping for. He's cold, he's starving, and he's all alone when he gets taken in by the artful Dodger. He's then introduced to the merry old gentleman, Fagin. Now, Fagin provides food and shelter, which is great, but his home is really a school for boys that teaches only one subject, the art of the steal.
And just when you think things might be turning around for him, the darkness just sucks him right back in. He gets a moment of real kindness with a man named Mr. Brownlow, but Fagin's gang can't risk having a witness out in the world. So he's violently recaptured and handed over to the terrifying housebreaker Bill Sikes, who forces him to help with a robbery. Well, the plan goes wrong, a shot rings out, and Oliver is left wounded in a ditch.
So you have to understand, this was never just some adventure story. Dickens was on a mission. He wasn't just telling a tale, he was actively picking a fight with the popular culture of his time and with the society that created it.
Dickens actually spelled it out in the preface to the novel. He was completely fed up with all the popular plays and books that made criminals seem glamorous. You know, like they were charming rogues on some grand adventure. He wanted to pull back that curtain and show the stern truth of what that life was actually like.
And this right here perfectly shows the fight he was picking. On one side, you had this romantic myth of the gentleman thief, living an exciting life. And on the other, Dickens gave us his reality. Fagin's filthy den, the artful Dodger's ragged coat, Nancy's messy hair. He refused to make their life look appealing. He wanted to show it as it really was, squalid, desperate, and just plain grim.
So, yeah, he wasn't just writing a novel. He was putting Victorian society on trial. And his targets? They were crystal clear. The cruelty of the workhouses, the hypocrisy of petty officials like Mr. Bumble, the horrific living conditions in the city slums, and a justice system that basically punished the poor for being poor.
So why are we still talking about this 19th century book? Why does it still feel so powerful? Let's get into the key takeaways and why it absolutely still matters today.
Now, this might sound like a bit of an exaggeration, but with Oliver Twist, the answer is a definite yes. You see, Dickens wasn't just screaming into the void. People in power were actually listening.
This is the perfect example of how fiction can have a direct impact on real-world policy. Dickens described this horrific slum called Jacob's Island, where the criminal Bill Sikes meets his end. The description was so vivid and so accurate that when a real cholera outbreak ravaged the area it was based on, his novel was actually cited as evidence in Parliament.
And this impact didn't just fade away. We're talking 12 years. That's how long after the book came out that the Bishop of London was still referencing Jacob's Island as proof that sanitation reform was desperately needed. The story forced the powerful to confront a reality they could no longer ignore.
Now, this is one of the most important questions the book asks. I mean, sure, you have villains like Bill Sikes who seem completely monstrous, but Dickens seems most interested in the characters who live in those shades of gray.
Dickens creates this fascinating moral spectrum. On one end, you've got Oliver, who represents absolute, unwavering goodness.
On the complete opposite end, there's Bill Sykes, a man Dickens himself describes as utterly and incurably bad. But the most complex, and I think the most interesting character, is Nancy. She exists right there in the messy middle.
You know, people in Dickens's time found Nancy's character totally unbelievable. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. How could a fallen woman, who's loyal to a brutal monster like Sykes, also be capable of such profound self-sacrifice and goodness? Dickens's response was simple and powerful. It is true. He argued that this contradiction, this mix of good and bad, wasn't just realistic, it was a fundamental truth of human nature.
And that, ultimately, is the book's most enduring lesson. It challenges us to look past simple labels. It pushes us to ask those bigger questions. Is a person's character something they're born with, or is it a product of their environment? The book's real challenge is for us to look past good or bad and really consider the complex forces that shape a human life.
So, this is the final question Oliver Twist leaves us with. Dickens used his storytelling as a weapon against the injustices he saw. So, as we close this out, just think about it. If he were alive today, looking at our world, what would he be writing about? What truths would he feel needed to be told?